The night was darker than most, the kind of dark that eats sound as much as it eats sight. No coyotes called, no owls stirred, just the restless whisper of the wind across the canyon. Jonas McAllister sat on his porch, one boot propped against the rail, the old Winchester leaning by the door. He wasn't expecting company. Company hadn't come to his door in months, not since the last storm rolled through and washed out the South Trail. But company came all the same. At first, he thought it was the wind knocking. Soft, hesitant, like a branch brushing against the wood. But then it came again, a little harder, and with it, something else. A voice. A woman's voice. Fragile, strained, barely strong enough to carry the words. "Please, walk away." Jonas rose slow, shotgun in hand, every step weighted with suspicion. He pulled the door open, and what he saw stopped him colder than any winter morning. A girl stood there, or what was left of one. Barefoot, dress torn, skin pale beneath streaks of dirt and dried blood. Her hair clung in knots around her face, and her lips trembled as though the air itself had turned against her. She wasn't asking for shelter, wasn't asking for water. She was asking him to let her go. "Please," she whispered again, eyes hollow, voice cracked. "Walk away." Jonas didn't move. His instincts told him she wasn't running from nothing. Shadows followed people like her, and shadows had a way of finding their mark. He didn't ask questions. He simply stepped back, just enough to give her room. "Inside," he said, voice low. "Before the night swallows you whole." She hesitated, as if every step was a betrayal of the warning she'd given. But the cold won over, and soon she was inside, clutching the old quilt Jonas pulled from the back of the chair. She wrapped it around herself, though it did little to hide the bruises on her arms, the fresh welt across her cheek. He set water to boil, laid bread and jerky on the table, and waited. She didn't eat. She didn't drink. She just sat, still as stone, until finally she raised her eyes to his. "You shouldn't have let me in," she said. Jonas studied her, slow, careful, the way a man studies a rattlesnake coiled in his path. "Why's that?" "Because they'll come," she whispered. Her hands shook now, though her voice steadied. "They always come. And when they do, whoever stands near me regrets it." Jonas leaned back in his chair, creaking wood filling the silence. He'd heard words like that before, on the battlefield, in towns where men thought cruelty was their right. But there was something different in her tone. Not fear. Not quite. More like certainty, the kind that comes when a soul's been chased too long. "Who's coming?" he asked. She shook her head. "You don't want to know." But Jonas did know. He'd seen enough men with money and guns to understand the kind of trouble that leaves a girl broken on a stranger's porch in the dead of night. He poured her a tin cup of water anyway, sliding it across the table. She didn't touch it. She only whispered again, softer this time, as though the words themselves were heavy. "Walk away." Morning came sharp and bright, painting the desert in gold, but the light didn't make things cleaner. If anything, it made the girl's bruises clearer, the hollow beneath her eyes deeper. Jonas sat outside, pipe clenched between his teeth, watching the horizon. He didn't need to wait long. A rider came hard down the trail, dust flying like smoke behind him. Big man, broad shoulders, face cut by a scar that ran ear to jaw. His horse was lathered, his eyes sharper than they had any right to be this early. Jonas didn't move. Just watched, slow and steady. The rider pulled up fast, boots hitting dirt with a thud. "You seen a girl?" he barked, voice already heavy with entitlement. "Barefoot, blonde, might be carrying a quilt." Jonas squinted like the sun was in his eyes. "Can't say I have." The man's lip curled, but he didn't push. "Not yet. She belongs to someone important. You understand. Best thing you can do is point the trail she took. Save yourself the trouble." Jonas spat tobacco into the dirt, slow. "Far as I can tell, ain't no man owns another person. You tell that important someone, if he's looking for his property, he's best look elsewhere." The rider stiffened. His hand drifted toward the iron at his side. But he didn't draw. Not then. He just stared long and hard, before turning his horse. "You'll regret it," he said flatly. Then he was gone, dust trailing like a storm cloud in his wake. Inside, the girl hadn't moved from the corner. She had heard it all. Her eyes found Jonas's, and for the first time, there was something there beyond emptiness. Confusion. Maybe even hope. "They'll come back," she said. Jonas nodded. "I reckon they will." The day stretched long, each hour dragging like a rusted chain. Jonas worked the land, fixing fence posts, chopping wood, but his eyes never left the horizon. The girl stayed mostly inside, silent, watching him through the window as if trying to understand why he hadn't sent her away. By sundown, the answer came. 3 riders this time. Dust rising like thunder. Jonas saw them before the dogs barked. He leaned the rifle against the porch rail, sat back, and waited. The girl hovered inside, trembling, her hands clutching the quilt so tight her knuckles whitened. The riders pulled up. One in the middle, dressed cleaner than the desert ought to allow. He wore gloves, polished boots, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Heard you're harboring my wife," he called. Jonas didn't blink. "I heard you're beating what ain't yours to touch." The man's smile cracked. "Law's on my side. Papers signed. Contracts sealed. She belongs to me." Jonas rose slow, stepping off the porch. Law don't mean much when it's written by cowards. The goons moved first. One swung wide with a pistol half drawn. Jonas was quicker. The rifle but cracked against his jaw, dropping him like a sack of grain. The other raised his revolver, but Jonas's shot rang out sharp, splitting the silence. The man dropped hard, dust swallowing his body. The leader, slick boots and dirty sole, staggered, glove still in his hand. Jonas stepped close, so close his shadow swallowed the man whole. "You hear me clear. Next time you ride this way, you best bring a coffin with your name on it." The man didn't speak, didn't breathe, just backed onto his horse and rode like the devil was at his heels. Silence fell again, heavy and long. When Jonas turned, the girl was standing in the doorway. She wasn't trembling anymore. Her shoulders had straightened, her eyes no longer empty. For the first time since she'd arrived, she looked alive. Weeks passed. No riders, no shadows, just the quiet work of survival. Jonas fixed fences. The girl helped feed chickens. She smiled, faint but real, when he handed her a hammer or showed her how to steady the posts. For a time, it seemed like the world had forgotten her. But the past doesn't forget. One morning, Jonas found her sitting on the edge of the cot, hands pressed to her stomach, eyes lost in the dust. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But he knew. He'd seen that look before. Life, growing where it wasn't asked for. A reminder. A burden. A chance. "What do I do?" she asked, voice breaking for the first time. Jonas rubbed his hands together, stared out the window. "You let it live." Her head snapped up. "Even if it's his?" Jonas turned to her, eyes steady. "Especially then. That child don't carry his sin. Only what you give it." She broke then. Not with screams, not with sobs, but with the soft collapse of a soul that had carried too much. She leaned into him, and for the first time, let herself be held. Jonas didn't say a word. He just kept his arms around her, as if maybe, just maybe, he could hold the pieces together. Months turned. The child grew. Folks in town whispered, but Jonas didn't care. He walked beside her, bought blankets, carved toys from leftover wood. He sat in church with her, head bowed, while the same people who whispered raised their voices in hymns. And when the baby came, small and fragile, she looked at Jonas, not with fear, but with trust. And he wondered then, not for the first time, if maybe she'd been right that first night. Maybe he should have walked away. Maybe stepping into her storm was the mistake that would cost him everything. But looking at her, holding the child against her chest, he knew one truth. Sometimes regret isn't about what you've done. Sometimes it's about what you'd have lost if you hadn't. So I'll ask you right here, while you sit listening to this tale. Could you do the same? Could you carry someone else's burden when it might destroy your peace? Could you raise a child that reminds you of the worst kind of man? Could you stand in front of trouble, knowing it would come for you next, just to give someone else a chance at life? If you believe you could, then you already understand what it means to be more than just a man. And if this story reached something inside you, don't let it stop here. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs reminding, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because out here, in the dust and silence, these stories ain't just tales. They're reminders of what it costs to care, of what it means to stay when walking away might have been easier, and maybe, just maybe, of what it takes to love what the world calls unworthy.